Power has its own gravity, pulling everything within its sphere into patterns of attraction and resistance that define the very architecture of existence. In the ancient halls of the Heir stronghold, where the weight of crown and bloodline had shaped the destinies of countless generations, such gravitational forces were about to encounter an anomaly that would challenge every assumption about strength, submission, and the hidden nature of those who appeared weakest in the eyes of those who considered themselves strongest. The marriage contract had been negotiated with the cold precision that characterized political arrangements designed to serve dynastic interests rather than personal desires. Prince Cassian Heir, heir to the Alpha King's throne, would wed an Omega, whose primary qualifications were her apparent harmlessness and her family's strategic value as allies, whose loyalty could be secured through such connection. It was meant to be transaction rather than union, obligation rather than partnership, duty rather than destiny. Elira Vale had been selected precisely because she seemed to embody everything the royal court expected from an Omega consort: gentle submission that would never challenge royal authority, soft-spoken deference that would never complicate political decisions, and fragile beauty that would serve ceremonial purposes without demanding real consideration or respect. She was meant to be ornamental rather than influential, present but not powerful, seen but never truly heard. Yet in the space between expectation and reality, between what appeared on the surface and what lay hidden beneath careful facades of survival, forces were stirring that would transform political necessity into something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The shy Omega who trembled at royal attention carried within her bloodline secrets that could reshape the very foundations upon which the Heir dynasty had built their authority. The wedding ceremony would proceed with all the pageantry that duty demanded, witnessed by a court that saw only what they expected to see: a prince fulfilling dynastic obligation, and an Omega accepting her ordained fate with appropriate gratitude. But when the doors closed on their wedding chamber, when public performance gave way to private truth, the careful balance of power that had sustained their world for centuries would begin to shift. Cassian's wolf would sense what his human arrogance had failed to recognize. Elira's presence would awaken instincts that connected to memories older than the current royal lineage, deeper than political convenience, more dangerous than anyone who valued stability could afford to acknowledge. The contained power she had learned to hide for survival would begin to emerge in response to proximity to someone whose own power was great enough to call forth what she had spent years suppressing. The forced marriage would become catalyst for revelations that threatened not just personal relationships, but the very legitimacy of a crown that had been worn by those who might not have been worthy of the forces it attempted to command. Love, when it came, would arrive not as blessing, but as complication that made truth impossible to ignore, and survival dependent upon choices that could destroy everything familiar in service of something unprecedented. In chambers where duty had always triumphed over desire, where submission had always been preferred to strength, where appearances had always mattered more than authenticity, two souls would discover that destiny rarely consulted political convenience before reshaping the world according to laws that transcended human planning and exceeded royal authority. The Alpha King's heir would learn that power could not always be commanded, only recognized when it chose to reveal itself. The shy Omega would discover that survival sometimes required abandoning safety in favor of truth, no matter how dangerous that truth might prove to those whose comfort depended upon maintaining illusions about the distribution of real authority in their carefully ordered world. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The wedding preparations had consumed the royal court for months, with attention to detail that emphasized the political significance of union between crown heir and carefully selected Omega, whose elevation would demonstrate royal magnanimity while securing alliance that served broader dynastic interests. Every element of ceremony had been choreographed to reinforce appropriate power relationships, while creating spectacle worthy of event that would be remembered as turning point in territorial governance and royal family stability. Prince Cassian Heir stood before mirrors that reflected image of someone prepared for duty rather than celebration, his formal attire emphasizing authority and status, while his expression carried resignation that suggested he understood exactly what this marriage represented in terms of political necessity versus personal fulfillment. At 28, he had reached age where dynastic succession required formal acknowledgement through union that would produce heirs while strengthening territorial alliances through strategic partnership. "Your Highness," his personal attendant said with diplomatic precision that acknowledged royal mood while maintaining professional efficiency. The ceremony begins within the hour. Final preparations require your attention to ensure proceedings reflect appropriate dignity and royal authority. Understood, Cassian replied, with voice that carried automatic authority, despite obvious lack of enthusiasm for events he could not control or modify according to personal preferences. What specific matters require resolution before public presentation? Dandarsam. Protocol regarding interaction with your intended bride during ceremonial exchange. The court expects demonstration of appropriate protection and respect, while maintaining clear hierarchy that reinforces proper royal behavior toward Omega consorts. The reminder emphasized that their public performance would be evaluated by courtiers, whose own positions depended upon maintaining established social structures through royal example that confirmed appropriate relationships between alphas and omegas, rulers and subjects, dynastic authority and individual submission, and private protocols for post-ceremony interactions that balance personal autonomy with conjugal expectations, standard arrangements for royal marriages involving Omega consorts, Your Highness, separate chambers with connecting access that allows appropriate interaction while maintaining royal dignity and Omega comfort during adjustment period. The administrative precision reduced intimate relationship to logistical considerations that prioritized political appearances over personal connection, though Cassian recognized that such arrangements reflected reality of dynastic marriages designed to serve interests that transcended individual preferences about romantic compatibility. As final preparations continued around him with efficiency that transformed personal milestone into state event requiring coordination between multiple administrative departments, Cassian found his thoughts turning to brief encounters he had shared with his intended bride during negotiation period, when their families had arranged meetings designed to ensure basic compatibility, despite lack of choice about ultimate outcome. Elira Vale had impressed him primarily through her ability to become nearly invisible during conversations that required her presence, but not her participation. She spoke when addressed directly, remained silent when discussion focused on matters beyond her designated concerns, and demonstrated exactly the type of deferential behavior that royal protocol demanded from Omega consorts, whose role emphasized support rather than influence. Yet something about her careful invisibility had troubled him in ways he couldn't articulate clearly. Her submission seemed too perfect, too practiced, as if she had studied royal expectations with systematic attention that suggested either exceptional dedication to appropriate behavior or exceptional skill at concealing whatever her natural inclinations might actually be. Your Highness, came voice from doorway that interrupted his reflection on bride, whose character remained largely unknown, despite months of formal courtship, designed to establish foundation for successful marriage. King Aldous requests immediate consultation regarding final ceremonial details that require Heir's approval before public presentation. Of course, Cassian said with automatic deference to paternal authority that had shaped his understanding of duty, responsibility, and the obligations that came with inheriting power that thousands of lives depended upon for stability and protection. I'll attend him immediately. The walk through corridors lined with portraits of ancestors whose own marriages had served dynastic interests provided reminder that personal preferences had never been primary consideration in royal unions designed to strengthen rather than satisfy those who wore crowns as duty rather than privilege. King Aldous stood in private study surrounded by documents that reflected ongoing coordination between royal marriage and broader territorial governance that required constant attention to alliance relationships, resource management, and security concerns that affected everyone living under royal protection. Cassian, his father said with tone that balanced paternal affection with royal authority, final confirmation needed regarding ceremonial elements that establish precedent for how Omega consorts will be integrated into royal protocols going forward. What precedent concerns require resolution, Father? Public demonstration of protective authority that acknowledges Omega value while reinforcing Alpha responsibility for guidance and security. The court needs clear example of appropriate royal behavior toward consorts whose elevation creates new category within established hierarchy, and private arrangements that serve both dynastic requirements and personal welfare of individuals whose lives are being transformed through marriage they did not choose. Arrangements that prioritize successful integration over immediate comfort, though comfort will develop through familiarity with royal responsibilities, and appreciation for opportunities that such elevation provides despite initial adjustment difficulties. The diplomatic framework emphasized long-term adaptation over short-term emotional considerations, while acknowledging that successful royal marriages required genuine cooperation rather than simple submission from partners whose satisfaction affected dynastic stability. Father, what intelligence do we possess regarding Elira's character beyond public behavior that has been shaped by awareness that she was being evaluated for royal consideration? Intelligence suggests individual whose primary strengths include adaptability, discretion, and appreciation for stability that royal protection provides. Family background indicates loyalty and traditional values that align with dynastic interests, while personal qualities suggest minimal likelihood of creating complications through inappropriate ambition or behavioral challenges. So we know she appears appropriate for royal consort role, but lack insight into her authentic character or personal motivations beyond survival, within systems that required careful behavior during evaluation period. Accurate assessment, though authentic character will emerge through shared experience rather than theoretical evaluation. Royal marriages succeed through mutual adaptation rather than perfect initial compatibility. The philosophical framework provided context for managing expectations about relationship development, while emphasizing practical approaches to building successful partnership, despite limited foundation of genuine understanding between individuals whose lives had been shaped by very different circumstances. Your Majesty, came interruption from royal administrator, whose responsibilities included coordinating final ceremonial elements. Guests have assembled and ceremonial participants are prepared for procession. The bride awaits royal escort to ceremonial chamber. Excellent, King Aldous replied with satisfaction, that reflected successful completion of complex political negotiation, rather than celebration of personal happiness. Cassian, fulfill your duty with dignity that honors both dynastic tradition and individual respect that such occasions deserve. Understood, Father. As Cassian prepared to collect his bride for ceremony that would transform both their lives through union designed to serve interests beyond their personal preferences, he found himself wondering what thoughts were passing through Elira's mind as she prepared for similar transformation, from relative anonymity to royal prominence, that would subject her to scrutiny and expectations she had never experienced. The walk through corridors that led to chambers where Elira awaited final escort provided opportunity for reflection on responsibilities that marriage would create for both partners, whose success would be measured by standards that neither had been consulted about during negotiations that had determined their shared future. But as he approached doors that separated him from bride, whose character remained largely mysterious, despite months of formal interaction, sound reached him that stopped his movement entirely and forced reconsideration of assumptions about the woman whose life was about to be bound to his through obligations neither could escape. Through slightly open door came voice that carried none of the hesitant deference he associated with Elira's public persona. Instead, he heard clear, confident tones addressing someone with authority that suggested comfort with command rather than submission to others' guidance. The contrast with her careful public behavior was so striking that for a moment he questioned whether he was listening to same person. Arrangements are satisfactory, though coordination will require attention to details that could become problematic if overlooked during transition period. Her voice continued with analytical precision that revealed systematic thinking about complex logistics. Privacy will be essential until circumstances develop sufficient stability to permit more open communication. The content suggested planning that went beyond simple wedding preparations to consideration of longer-term strategies that required careful coordination and discretion. But planning for what purposes, and with whom was she coordinating activities that required privacy and strategic timing? Your Highness, came voice from behind him as personal attendant approached with professional efficiency that suggested ceremony timeline required immediate adherence to schedule, regardless of Prince's apparent distraction by whatever he was observing. Final escort to ceremonial chamber cannot be delayed without creating scheduling complications that would affect entire proceeding. Of course, Cassian replied, with automatic courtesy, while his attention remained focused on implications of overhearing conversation that revealed aspects of his bride's character that contradicted everything he had been led to expect about her personality and capabilities. As he prepared to announce his arrival and provide escort that protocol demanded, The conversation beyond door concluded with decisive efficiency that emphasized Elira's apparent role as coordinator rather than passive participant in whatever arrangements were being finalized. When door opened to reveal his bride prepared for ceremony that would transform her from minor noble to royal consort, the contrast between woman he had just heard speaking with authority and figure who now stood before him with appropriately lowered eyes was so dramatic that he found himself questioning whether he had imagined entire exchange. "Your Highness," Elira said with perfect deference, that matched every previous interaction they had shared, her voice carrying familiar hesitation that suggested uncertainty about appropriate behavior in royal presence. "I am honored by your escort and grateful for union that serves both family interests and dynastic stability." "The honor is mutual," Cassian replied with formal courtesy that protocol demanded, while his mind processed disconnect between confident coordinator he had overheard and deferential consort, who now stood before him displaying exactly the submissive behavior that royal expectations demanded. "Are preparations complete for ceremony that will formalize our union and alliance between our families?" "Yes, Your Highness, though I hope my inexperience with royal protocols doesn't create difficulties during proceedings that reflect upon your dignity and authority." The modest self-deprecation aligned perfectly with Omega behavior that court expected, though Cassian found himself wondering whether such modesty represented authentic uncertainty or carefully maintained performance designed to manage others' perceptions about her capabilities and intentions. As he offered formal escort toward ceremonial chamber where their marriage would be solemnized before assembled court, whose observation would judge success of political arrangement through demonstration of appropriate royal behavior and Omega submission, Cassian realized that he was about to marry a woman whose true character remained completely unknown to him, despite months of interaction designed to establish foundation for successful partnership. The shy Omega, who trembled at royal attention, might be authentic personality, or might be protective disguise that concealed someone whose actual nature would emerge only when circumstances required authentic response, rather than careful performance of expected behavior. Either way, their marriage would begin with fundamental deception about the identity of at least one partner whose life was being transformed through union that served political necessity, while potentially creating complications that neither families nor royal court had anticipated during negotiations that focused on strategic advantages rather than personal compatibility. The ceremony would proceed with appropriate dignity and royal authority, but the marriage that began when public performance ended and private reality commenced would be relationship between strangers, whose mutual discovery might prove more challenging than anyone had prepared for during planning that assumed Omega compliance would ensure smooth integration into royal household designed to serve dynastic interests above all other considerations. Looking at Elira's carefully composed expression as they walked toward ceremony that would bind their lives together through obligations neither could escape, Cassian wondered which version of her personality would emerge when wedding night privacy forced abandonment of public performance in favor of authentic interaction between individuals whose futures now depended upon successful adaptation. Circumstances neither had chosen freely. The answer would reshape not just their personal relationship, but potentially the stability of royal household, whose security had been assumed to be guaranteed through marriage, that seemed politically safe, precisely because one partner appeared too weak to create complications for established power structures that had never been tested by challenges from unexpected sources. The ceremony proceeded with flawless precision that reflected months of preparation by court officials whose reputations depended upon creating spectacle worthy of dynastic occasion, while ensuring every protocol detail reinforced appropriate power relationships between royal authority and noble submission. The great hall blazed with ceremonial splendor, designed to impress assembled guests, while demonstrating royal prosperity and territorial stability through ostentatious display of resources that individual noble families could never match. Cassian stood beside Elira before officiant, whose role emphasized sacred nature of union, while acknowledging political necessities that such marriages served for territorial governance and dynastic succession. Their formal exchange of vows followed prescribed language that emphasized duty, loyalty, and mutual support within hierarchical framework that preserved royal authority, while elevating Omega consort to position that balanced influence with appropriate deference. But throughout ceremony, designed to create public spectacle that would be remembered as significant moment in royal family history, Cassian found his attention repeatedly drawn to observations about his bride, that challenged assumptions he had formed during limited previous interactions shaped by formal protocol and careful behavioral management. Elira responded to ceremonial requirements with composure that seemed almost too perfect, as if she had rehearsed not just specific responses, but emotional presentations designed to create desired impressions about her character and suitability for royal elevation. Her modest demeanor appeared practiced rather than natural, while her deferential gestures carried precision that suggested systematic preparation rather than instinctive behavior. More intriguingly, during moments when officiants addressed assembled court, rather than wedding participants directly, her attention seemed to survey assembled guests with awareness that resembled analytical assessment rather than nervous observation. The shy Omega, who supposedly found court attention overwhelming, appeared quite comfortable monitoring complex social dynamics, while maintaining appearance of appropriate submission. By ancient law and sacred tradition, the officiant announced with authority that carried across hall, filled with representatives from throughout territorial system, "I pronounce this union blessed and binding, according to customs that have governed royal marriages for generations beyond memory." Witnessed and acknowledged, responded assembled court with collective voice that emphasized community support for dynastic decision, while demonstrating appropriate respect for ceremonial conclusion that formalized political alliance through personal bond. As formal ceremony concluded with prescribed rituals that established new royal household while maintaining traditional power structures, preparation began for reception that would allow informal interaction between newlyweds and assembled guests whose political positions required appropriate attention from royal family members newly elevated through marriage that served broader territorial Esta. But first would come brief private interval designed to allow couple moments of privacy for transition from public performance to personal relationship that would develop according to dynamics hidden from court observation and political evaluation. "Your Highness," Elira said as they entered private chamber, designated for such transitional privacy, her voice carrying familiar hesitation despite recent completion of ceremony that had formally elevated her to royal status, requiring different behavioral expectations. "I hope the ceremony met appropriate standards and reflected positively upon your dignity and family honor." The ceremony was flawlessly executed, though its success will be determined by quality of marriage it formalized rather than perfection of public presentation, Cassian replied while studying her expression for signs of authentic personality beneath carefully maintained facade of appropriate Omega behavior. "And what determines quality of royal marriage beyond fulfillment of dynastic obligations and maintenance of appropriate protocols? Genuine partnership that serves shared purposes, rather than simple compliance with predetermined roles that might not reflect individual capabilities or preferences." "I understand, Your Highness, though I hope my inexperience with royal responsibilities doesn't compromise partnership development that serves dynastic interests, while honoring both individual dignity and established hierarchies." The response demonstrated sophisticated understanding of complex balance required for successful royal marriage, while maintaining verbal patterns that suggested continued commitment to deferential behavior despite elevated status that might justify different approach to communication. "Elira," Cassian said with decision to abandon formal protocols that seemed increasingly artificial given their changed relationship status. "We're now married and bound together through circumstances neither chose freely. Perhaps honest communication would serve our partnership better than continued performance of expected behaviors." "What type of honest communication would serve our partnership while maintaining appropriate respect for hierarchical differences that remain relevant despite marriage contract?" "Communication that acknowledges we're both intelligent individuals capable of adapting to circumstances through cooperation, rather than submission and dominance patterns that might not reflect our actual personalities or natural interaction styles." For first time since he had known her, Elira's carefully composed expression shifted toward something that might have been surprise, though she quickly restored appropriate deference that suggested comfort with established behavioral patterns, despite invitation to modify them through more egalitarian approach. "Your Highness, I appreciate such consideration, though I'm uncertain whether abandonment of established protocols serves dynastic interests, that our marriage was designed to strengthen through demonstration of appropriate royal authority and Omega compliance. Perhaps we could explore what serves our shared interests, rather than simply conforming to others' expectations about how our relationship should function. And what shared interests would guide such exploration?" Before Cassian could respond with explanation of partnership possibilities that might transcend conventional royal marriage expectations, their private conversation was interrupted by necessity to attend reception, that protocol required for acknowledging assembled guests whose presence honored union, while providing opportunity for political networking that such occasions facilitated. The reception hall buzzed with conversations that mixed celebration of dynastic milestone with political discussions about alliance implications and territorial advantages that marriage would provide through strengthened relationships between royal authority and noble families whose loyalty such elevation secured. Cassian moved through receiving line with practiced efficiency that balanced personal courtesy with royal authority, while Elira demonstrated remarkable adaptation to royal protocol, despite supposed inexperience with formal court procedures. Her responses to congratulations and political observations suggested sophistication that contradicted assumptions about her preparation for royal responsibilities. "Princess Elira," said Lord Chancellor Aldwin with formal courtesy, that acknowledged her elevated status while providing opportunity for evaluation of her suitability for political discussions that royal consorts increasingly participated in during modern territorial governance. "Your family's alliance strengthens territorial security through cooperation that serves broader strategic interests." "Indeed, Lord Chancellor," Elira replied with confidence that seemed to emerge naturally despite previous demonstrations of uncertainty about appropriate behavior in political contexts. "Alliance benefits require careful nurturing through consistent cooperation rather than simple contractual obligations." "Wise observation, Your Highness." Territorial governance increasingly requires sophisticated understanding of alliance dynamics, rather than traditional approaches that emphasized authority over cooperation. The exchange demonstrated political awareness that exceeded expectations about Omega preparation for royal responsibilities, while suggesting comfort with complex discussions that required analytical thinking rather than simple deference to others' expertise. As reception continued with similar demonstrations of Elira's unexpected competence in political discussions that she supposedly lacked preparation for, Cassian found himself observing women whose capabilities seemed to expand dramatically when circumstances required actual performance rather than careful management of others' perceptions. "Captain Thorne," Elira said during conversation about territorial defense that should have been beyond Omega concerns, "alliance coordination would benefit from improved communication protocols that ensure rapid response to developing threats rather than reliance on administrative channels that might introduce delays during crisis situations." "Excellent observation, Your Highness. Communication efficiency directly affects defensive effectiveness, though implementation requires coordination between multiple command authorities whose cooperation isn't always optimal. Perhaps liaison positions could facilitate such coordination by providing dedicated communication channels that bypass administrative complexity while maintaining appropriate command authority." The strategic recommendation demonstrated sophisticated understanding of military logistics that exceeded anything Cassian had observed during their previous interactions, while her confident presentation suggested comfort with complex problem-solving that contradicted her careful displays of uncertainty during formal courtship. As evening continued revealing aspects of his wife's character that challenged every assumption about her background and capabilities, Cassian realized that his marriage had bound him to someone whose authentic identity remained completely unknown, despite months of interaction designed to establish foundation for successful partnership. The shy Omega who trembled at royal attention apparently possessed political sophistication, strategic thinking abilities, and social confidence that she had concealed through careful performance of expected behavior during evaluation period, when demonstration of such capabilities might have raised questions about her suitability for traditional Omega consort role. But why would someone with obvious intelligence and competence choose to conceal such qualities through systematic deception that required constant attention to behavioral management? What advantages did apparent weakness provide that authentic demonstration of capability would threaten? As reception concluded with appropriate ceremony that acknowledged successful celebration, while transitioning toward private time that would allow genuine interaction between newlyweds, whose relationship development would proceed according to personal dynamics rather than public expectations, Cassian prepared for conversations that might finally reveal who his wife actually was beneath carefully constructed facade. The wedding night would provide opportunity for authentic communication, without political observers or protocol requirements that shaped public interaction. But it would also force confrontation with questions about trust, deception, and compatibility that might prove more challenging than either partner had prepared for. During courtship, focused on creating favorable impressions rather than establishing genuine understanding. Looking at Elira as they prepared to retire to chambers where privacy would permit honest conversation about their relationship and shared future, Cassian wondered whether discovery of her authentic personality would strengthen their partnership or reveal incompatibilities that political necessity had overlooked during negotiations that prioritized strategic advantages over personal compatibility. The marriage contract had been signed and ceremonially blessed, but the actual relationship between two intelligent individuals whose lives had been bound together through dynastic necessity was about to begin with revelations that would determine whether obligation could transform into partnership or whether fundamental deceptions would prove too significant for trust to develop, despite formal bonds that neither could escape. The shy Omega who had been selected for her apparent harmlessness might prove to be anything but harmless, once privacy allowed authentic expression of capabilities that public safety had required her to conceal during evaluation process that never suspected what lay beneath careful performance of expected submission. The Alpha King's heir was about to discover whether his forced marriage had provided him with submissive consort or intelligent partner whose hidden strengths might prove more valuable than anticipated, or more dangerous than anyone had imagined possible. The royal chambers had been prepared with attention to detail that emphasized both luxury and privacy, creating an environment where newlyweds could begin developing personal relationship without court observation or political pressure that shaped public interaction. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across furnishings that balanced royal dignity with intimate comfort, while carefully arranged flowers provided aesthetic pleasure without ostentatious display that might interfere with genuine conversation. Cassian dismissed attending servants with courteous efficiency that established privacy while maintaining appropriate royal protocols, leaving him alone with wife whose authentic personality he was finally prepared to discover after months of interaction constrained by formal expectations and careful behavioral management that had concealed rather than revealed individual character traits. Elira, he said with decision to abandon honorifics that seemed artificial given their changed circumstances and need for honest communication about relationship that would define both their personal satisfaction and political effectiveness going forward. We have privacy now. Perhaps we could speak honestly about who we actually are, rather than continuing to perform roles that others expect us to fulfill. What aspects of honest communication interest you most? She replied, with voice that carried subtle shift away from deferential hesitation, toward clearer articulation that suggested comfort with direct discussion, despite previous demonstrations of uncertainty about appropriate behavior. I'm interested in understanding whether the shy, submissive Omega I've been introduced to represents your authentic personality or careful performance designed to create specific impressions during evaluation period, when demonstration of different qualities might have affected marriage negotiations. For first time since he had known her, Elira's carefully composed expression shifted toward something that might have been amusement, though she quickly restored neutral demeanor that suggested continued caution about revealing reactions that might not align with established expectations. And what evidence suggests that my public behavior might not represent authentic personality? Evidence including political sophistication you demonstrated tonight, strategic thinking you applied to military logistics, social confidence you displayed during complex conversations, and analytical precision I overheard during coordination discussion before ceremony. You observed more carefully than I anticipated. Elira acknowledged with tone that suggested both respect for his perceptiveness and concern about implications of having her performance evaluated so systematically. What conclusions have you drawn from such observations? Tucked. Conclusions that you're significantly more capable than you've allowed others to recognize, though I'm uncertain why someone with obvious intelligence would choose deception over authentic demonstration of competence that could serve both personal advancement and political effectiveness. Perhaps because authentic demonstration of certain types of competence creates dangers that careful performance avoids, particularly for individuals whose survival depends upon others' comfort, with predetermined assumptions about appropriate behavior and natural limitations. The explanation suggested systematic approach to self-protection that went beyond simple modesty to strategic concealment of capabilities that might threaten established power relationships or challenge assumptions about Omega limitations that political stability required maintaining. What types of dangers would competence create that justify systematic deception during marriage negotiations designed to establish partnership based on mutual understanding and compatible goals? Dangers related to expectations about Omega submission that might be challenged by evidence of capabilities exceeding conventional assumptions about natural hierarchies and appropriate authority distribution. So you concealed intelligence and competence because authentic demonstration might have threatened marriage prospects by challenging preconceptions about Omega suitability for traditional consort roles. Partially, though complete explanation involves considerations beyond marriage prospects to broader survival strategies that shaped behavioral patterns developed over years of experience with circumstances that required careful management of others' perceptions. The admission suggested background that included systematic threats requiring protective deception, though specific nature of such threats remained unclear despite obvious significance for understanding her character and motivations. What circumstances required development of survival strategies based on concealing, rather than utilizing natural capabilities that could serve both personal advancement and social contribution? Circumstances involving family background that created complications regarding assumptions about loyalty, political alignment, and appropriate social positioning that could affect survival prospects if certain connections became widely known. Complications involving your family's political alignment during recent territorial conflicts? For first time during their conversation, Elira's composure showed genuine uncertainty, as she apparently weighed risks of honest disclosure against dangers of continued deception, now that marriage had created shared interests that might justify greater trust despite potential political complications. Complications involving family connections to resistance movements that challenged royal authority during border conflicts that required resolution through methods that created lasting concerns about loyalty and political reliability among those associated with opposing forces. The revelation sent ice through Cassian's chest as implications began to penetrate his understanding of political landscape that had shaped marriage negotiations apparently designed to serve purposes beyond simple alliance, strengthening between compatible noble families. Your family supported resistance movements that opposed royal authority during recent territorial conflicts. My family provided assistance to groups whose political objectives included greater autonomy for border territories and modified approaches to resource allocation that challenged established administrative priorities. And this assistance was discovered by Royal Intelligence Services, whose responsibility includes monitoring potential threats to territorial stability and dynastic security. Assistance was discovered, family members were questioned, and political reliability was evaluated through processes that resulted in enhanced oversight of family activities and careful management of political participation that could affect territorial security. So your marriage to royal heir represents method for ensuring family loyalty through personal bonds that make future resistance activities impossible without threatening your own position and safety. Marriage serves multiple purposes, including alliance strengthening, loyalty assurance, and integration of potentially problematic family connections into royal household, where activities can be monitored while providing opportunities for demonstrating reformed political alignment through service to dynastic interests. The political framework surrounding their marriage was far more complex than Cassian had understood during negotiations that had emphasized strategic advantages while concealing security considerations that affected fundamental nature of union he had entered into without informed consent about true purposes being served. And your systematic concealment of capabilities represents protection against suspicions about Omega intelligence being used for gathering information or influencing royal decision-making in ways that might serve former political alignments rather than current dynastic loyalty. Concealment serves multiple protective purposes, including avoiding suspicions about intelligence gathering, while preventing expectations about political participation that might create complications if family background affected perceptions about appropriate roles and reasonable limitations for Omega consorts with questionable political histories. So you've been performing carefully calibrated submission designed to appear harmless while concealing both intelligence that could be perceived as threatening and family connections that could raise questions about ultimate loyalty to dynastic interests that marriage was supposed to secure. Performance has been necessary for survival within political environment, where authentic demonstration of capabilities combined with family background might create security concerns that could affect not just personal safety, but welfare of family members whose survival depends upon successful integration into acceptable political alignment. As implications of systematic deception surrounding their marriage continued expanding through revelations that challenged every assumption about alliance purposes and personal motivations, Cassian found himself confronting questions about trust, compatibility, and political complications that negotiations had concealed rather than addressed through honest evaluation of circumstances that would define their relationship. "Elira," he said with voice that struggled to maintain calm authority while processing information that transformed understanding of marriage from simple political arrangement into complex security operation designed to serve interests he hadn't been informed about during decision-making that had determined his personal future. What authentic relationship is possible between us given foundation of systematic deception about identity, capabilities, and political background that affects every aspect of our shared circumstances? Authentic relationship requires mutual understanding of pressures and limitations that shape individual choices, including recognition that survival sometimes requires protective deception, until circumstances develop sufficient trust and security to permit honest communication without unacceptable risks. And what circumstances would permit such honest communication given security concerns that apparently extend beyond personal relationship to broader questions about family loyalty and political reliability that could affect territorial stability? Circumstances that include development of personal trust sufficient to overcome political suspicions, demonstration of genuine commitment to shared interests despite family background, and time to establish pattern of behavior that proves loyalty to dynastic interests rather than former political alignments. How much time would such establishment require, and what demonstrations would prove sufficient to overcome suspicions about motivations that shaped marriage designed to serve security purposes I wasn't informed about during negotiations that determined my personal future? Before Elira could respond to questions about timeline and criteria for developing authentic relationship, despite foundation of political necessity and protective deception, their private conversation was interrupted by urgent sound from beyond chamber doors that suggested immediate attention required for developments that couldn't wait for newlywed privacy to conclude according to original she. "Duel, Your Highness," came voice of personal guard, whose responsibilities included protecting royal family members from threats that might materialize without warning. Immediate consultation required regarding security developments that affect royal household safety and territorial stability. "Enter," Cassian commanded with automatic authority, despite obvious frustration at interruption of conversation that was beginning to reveal crucial information about marriage circumstances and personal compatibility that required resolution before relationship could proceed on foundation of mutual understanding rather than systematic deception. "Your Highness, intelligence reports indicate coordinated surveillance of royal household activities by unknown parties, whose interest appears focused on recent marriage and associated alliance implications, rather than routine territorial monitoring. Assessment of threat levels and potential targeting priorities. Unknown, Your Highness, though surveillance sophistication suggests organization with significant resources and detailed knowledge of royal security protocols that would be difficult to obtain through casual observation. Recommendations for enhanced security measures that address potential threats while maintaining operational efficiency for royal household activities. Enhanced personal protection for royal family members, restricted access to private areas where sensitive conversations might occur, and investigation of surveillance network to determine identity and objectives of monitoring parties. The security complications created immediate pressure for decisions that would affect both personal safety and relationship development that required privacy for honest communication about political background and authentic personality traits that shaped compatibility prospects. Captain, implement enhanced protection protocols that ensure safety, while allowing necessary privacy for royal household development that serves both personal and political interests. Understood, Your Highness, though privacy limitations may be necessary until surveillance threats are identified and addressed through appropriate countermeasures. As security considerations began reshaping their immediate circumstances while broader questions about political background and systematic deception remained unresolved despite obvious importance for relationship development, Cassian realized that his wedding night had revealed complications that extended far beyond personal compatibility, to include threats that could affect not just marriage sue, CSES but individual survival in an environment where political loyalties and family backgrounds created vulnerabilities that careful deception had been designed to manage. Looking at Alira's expression as security protocols transformed their private chambers into monitored environment, where authentic conversation would require even greater caution, despite obvious need for honest communication about shared future, that depended upon resolution of trust issues created through months of necessary but systematic deception about identity, capabilities, and political motivations. Cassian understood that discovery of his wife's true nature had revealed dangers as well as possibilities. The shy Omega who had concealed intelligence and family background to survive political circumstances that threatened anyone associated with resistance movements was indeed more capable than anyone had recognized. But her capabilities came with complications that made their marriage simultaneously more valuable and more dangerous than dynastic planners had anticipated when they designed alliance that served security purposes through methods that neither bride nor groom had been fully informed about during negotiations that bound their lives together. 6 months later, the morning sun cast long shadows across Private Garden where Cassian and Alira had found space for conversations that required privacy from court observation and security monitoring that had become permanent feature of their daily existence since surveillance threats had revealed unknown enemies whose interest in their marriage continued, despite enhanced protective measures. Their relationship had evolved through careful balance between genuine affection that had developed despite foundation of political necessity and ongoing security requirements that limited privacy while providing protection against threats whose nature remained mysterious despite months of investigation by Royal Intelligence Services. The Council meeting this afternoon will address territorial governance modifications that require your input regarding alliance coordination, Cassian said, as they reviewed administrative responsibilities that had gradually expanded to include Alira's participation in political discussions, where her intelligence and analytical capabilities served dynastic interests rather than requiring concealment for security purposes. What specific modifications require consideration? And how do alliance relationships affect implementation strategies? Alira replied with confidence that had emerged gradually as trust developed between them, while external threats had demonstrated need for cooperation that transcended initial deception about capabilities and background. Modifications that would improve resource allocation efficiency while strengthening defensive coordination between allied territories that face similar security challenges from unknown enemies whose capabilities suggest sophisticated organization and strategic planning. Such coordination would benefit from systematic analysis of resource distribution patterns and communication protocols that currently limit response time during crisis situations. She observed with strategic thinking that had proven invaluable for addressing complex administrative challenges that royal governance regularly confronted. Indeed, though implementation requires careful balance between operational efficiency and security protocols that prevent information sharing from creating vulnerabilities that enemies might exploit through intelligence gathering or infiltration strategies. Key. Their professional collaboration had become foundation for personal relationship that served both individual satisfaction and political effectiveness through partnership that utilized both their capabilities while maintaining appropriate security awareness about ongoing threats that continued targeting royal household activities. As they prepared for council session that would demonstrate continued evolution of their marriage from political obligation into genuine partnership that strengthened rather than complicated royal governance. Movement near garden entrance drew their attention toward approaching figure, whose presence always commanded respect, despite carrying news that typically required immediate administrative attention. "Your Highnesses," Captain Thorne announced with professional courtesy that balanced security urgency with respect for royal privacy. Intelligence breakthrough regarding surveillance operations that have been monitoring royal household activities since your marriage ceremony. What has investigation revealed about identity and objectives of monitoring parties? Cassian asked with attention that immediately focused on security implications that could affect both personal safety and broader territorial stability. Investigation reveals coordination with resistance networks that remained active despite official resolution of border conflicts, with specific interest in alliance relationships and loyalty commitments that marriage was designed to secure for territorial governance. And assessment of threat levels that such coordination represents for royal security and territorial stability? Assessment indicates sophisticated organization with detailed intelligence about royal security protocols and alliance relationships, suggesting infiltration or information sharing that exceeds casual surveillance capabilities. The security implications were significant enough to require enhanced protective measures, while raising questions about loyalty and information security that could affect not just personal relationship, but broader confidence in alliance relationships that marriage had been designed to strengthen. Captain, implement additional security protocols while maintaining operational capacity for royal responsibilities that serve territorial governance despite enhanced threat environment. Understood, Your Highness. Additional measures will focus on information security and access control, while preserving necessary flexibility for administrative functions. As security enhancement continued addressing ongoing threats that demonstrated persistent opposition to royal authority and alliance relationships that political marriage had been designed to secure, Cassian found himself reflecting on transformation that had occurred through months of gradual trust development, despite foundation of initial deception and political complications. His marriage to a woman whose authentic capabilities had been systematically concealed had evolved into partnership that served both personal satisfaction and political effectiveness through cooperation that transcended original strategic purposes while addressing security challenges that required sophisticated responses to persistent threats. The shy Omega who had trembled at royal attention had indeed been contained power rather than authentic weakness, though her emergence into confident partnership had proven more valuable than dangerous, as security concerns had shifted from internal loyalty questions to external threats that required unified response rather than suspicious monitoring. Looking toward Alira as she processed security information with analytical precision that had become essential for addressing complex challenges facing royal household and territorial governance, Cassian recognized that discovery of her hidden nature had ultimately strengthened rather than threatened his position through partnership that combined their capabilities for addressing persistent oppos, issue that conventional approaches had failed to resolve completely. Their forced marriage had indeed revealed secrets that challenged assumptions about power and loyalty, though those revelations had created opportunities for authentic relationship that served both personal happiness and political effectiveness through cooperation that neither had anticipated during ceremony, that had bound their lives together through dynastic necessity. The Alpha King's heir had discovered that his shy Omega possessed intelligence, strategic capability, and fierce loyalty that made her invaluable partner rather than submissive ornament, while political complications that had required initial deception had ultimately strengthened their bond through shared challenges that demanded trust and cooperation for survival, in an environment where enemies cannot. Continued testing royal security through methods that required constant adaptation and mutual support. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.